The hidden truth. Rebecca Taylor stood outside the Majestic Hotel, a name that resonated with elegance, luxury, and perfection. The sun hung low in the Manhattan sky, casting long shadows along the bustling sidewalks. Rebecca was a striking figure, but today, she wasn't the poised and polished businesswoman the world knew. Today, she was a woman in disguise, her usual tailored suits replaced by worn jeans, a simple blouse, and a baseball cap pulled low over her brow. Oversized sunglasses shielded her eyes, hiding the determination that burned beneath. She wasn't just Rebecca Taylor, the billionaire hotel magnate. Today, she was a mere guest, eager to witness the hotel from a perspective she had long lost touch with. The Majestic Hotel had been her brainchild. She had built it from the ground up, pouring years of hard work, sweat, and an unwavering vision into creating what had become one of the finest hotels in the city. It was a symbol of her success, a physical representation of everything she had achieved. But recently, something had felt off. The hotel she had envisioned, a place of warmth, inclusivity, and excellence, no longer felt like her own. The sparkling marble floors, the towering crystal chandeliers, and the lavish amenities were still there, but there was a coldness that lingered in the air, a detachment that Rebecca couldn't ignore. She had spent years working tirelessly, always focused on growing her empire, but somewhere along the way, she had lost touch with the heart of her business. The people who walked through the doors of the Majestic no longer seemed to matter as much as their bank accounts, their appearances, or the brands they wore. Rebecca could feel it in her gut. The subtle whispers of judgment, the favoritism shown to wealthy guests, the disregard for the humble ones. It was time to see her hotel through the eyes of an ordinary guest. As she approached the revolving doors, Rebecca's pulse quickened. She was nervous, unsure of what she would find. She hadn't prepared for this moment in her usual meticulous manner. Today, she was stepping into the unknown, testing her legacy, her values, and her hotel's culture. She took a deep breath and pushed the doors open, stepping into the lobby. The first thing that hit her was the familiar scent of fresh flowers, mixed with the polished marble. The lobby was just as grand as she had envisioned, but something about it felt different today. The usual buzz of laughter and conversation from guests seemed muted, replaced by a tension in the air that Rebecca could almost taste. The hotel was full of life, yes, but there was something beneath the surface, an undercurrent of judgment, of exclusivity, that disturbed her. She walked to the reception desk, where a young woman named Tiffany was assisting a well-dressed couple. The couple laughed and exchanged pleasantries, oblivious to the subtle sneers and sidelong glances being cast around them. Rebecca stood, waiting patiently, trying not to let the rising tension in her chest show. Tiffany didn't even acknowledge her presence, her focus entirely on the couple before her. The minutes ticked by, and Rebecca shifted from foot to foot, the weight of the cold marble beneath her shoes reminding her that she was, in this moment, just another guest, a guest being ignored and dismissed. Finally, the couple left, their laughter still echoing in the air. Rebecca took a step forward, trying to suppress the growing anger within her. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice carrying the faintest edge of forced cheerfulness. "I'd like to book a room for the next 3 nights." Tiffany looked up, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly as they scanned Rebecca's appearance. The flicker of disdain was barely noticeable, but it didn't escape Rebecca's sharp gaze. "I'm sorry, madam," Tiffany said with an overly polite tone, one that felt more like a dismissal than an offer of service. "We're fully booked for the next few days." Rebecca's brow furrowed. She knew the hotel was not fully booked. She had checked that very morning, ensuring there were plenty of available rooms. Something wasn't right. "That's strange," Rebecca said, her voice calm but firm. "I checked online, and there were plenty of vacancies." Tiffany's smile tightened, her eyes briefly flicking toward the entrance, as if anticipating a more important guest arriving at any moment. "Perhaps there's been a last-minute booking," she said dismissively. "These things happen." Rebecca could feel the anger rising in her chest, but she knew better than to let it boil over. She wasn't here to start a confrontation. She was here to understand what was happening behind the scenes. "Could I perhaps see a room?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral, though inside, her suspicions deepened. Tiffany hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the request. Her eyes darted toward the entrance again, then back to Rebecca. "Very well, madam," she said after a long pause. "But I can't guarantee anything." Rebecca followed Tiffany to the elevator, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed that something was amiss. She wasn't just being ignored, she was being judged. Tiffany's condescending tone, the obvious disdain in her eyes, and the cold treatment all pointed to something deeper, something systemic. This wasn't just a matter of poor service, it was prejudice, discrimination based on appearances and social status. As the elevator ascended, Rebecca felt her determination solidify. She wasn't just here as a guest. She was here as the owner of this establishment, and she would get to the bottom of what was happening, no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. She couldn't ignore it anymore. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a plush hallway, its carpets thick and soft beneath Rebecca's feet. Tiffany led her to the presidential suite, the hotel's most luxurious accommodation. Tiffany fumbled with the keycard, then swung open the door, ushering Rebecca inside. The suite was magnificent, floor-to-ceiling windows offering sweeping views of the city skyline, a grand piano sitting in one corner, and a king-size bed draped in Egyptian cotton. "This is impressive," Rebecca admitted, her voice betraying a hint of appreciation. Tiffany beamed with pride, her earlier coldness momentarily vanishing. "Only our most esteemed guests have the privilege of staying here," she said as though she was doing Rebecca a favor. The emphasis on esteemed was not lost on Rebecca. Tiffany's words weren't just about the room. They were about who deserved it, who belonged in the world of luxury the Majestic promised. And in Tiffany's eyes, Rebecca, dressed in her modest attire, didn't quite fit the bill. "Thank you for showing me the suite," Rebecca said, her voice calm. "I'll consider my options." Tiffany's eyebrows shot up, surprised by the polite dismissal. "But madam, this is the best we have," she said, her tone now tinged with a slight desperation. "Surely you won't find anything comparable in the city." Rebecca merely smiled, her expression enigmatic. "Perhaps not," she said, turning on her heel. "But I prefer a hotel where the staff is as impressive as the accommodations." With that, she left, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the hallway. Tiffany watched her go, stunned, unable to comprehend what had just transpired. As Rebecca made her way back to the elevator, her mind swirled with thoughts. This encounter had confirmed her suspicions. There was a clear divide in the way the guests were treated. The rich and famous were showered with attention, while the ordinary guest was ignored or made to feel unwelcome. The Majestic Hotel, her creation, had become a place of exclusivity, not inclusivity, and Rebecca couldn't allow that to continue. She wasn't just going to restore the hotel's reputation, she was going to reclaim the soul of the Majestic. And that meant confronting the staff, addressing the deep-seated biases, and making the changes necessary to return the hotel to its original vision. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but Rebecca was determined to see it through. The first step had been taken. She had seen the truth, and now she would fight for the change her hotel and its guests deserved. The veil lifts. The Majestic Hotel's grand lobby gleamed like a cathedral of luxury, with towering columns and polished marble floors that seemed to shine even in the dim light of late afternoon. But Rebecca, as she strode through its vast space, no longer saw just the crystal chandeliers or the velvet drapes adorning the windows. She saw something deeper, a place that had once been built on the values of kindness, respect, and inclusivity, but now it seemed to pulse with a different energy, one tainted by subtle but pervasive prejudice. The subtle unease she had felt during her earlier visit had only grown more pronounced after her conversation with Tiffany. The hotel had, over the years, become a place that catered more to the whims of the wealthy than the well-being of all guests, regardless of their social status or appearance. In that instant, Rebecca realized the truth. She had been so focused on the broader growth of her empire that she had ignored the small but significant details that could easily poison an entire institution. Rebecca had come to the hotel under the guise of a guest, hoping to understand what her vision had become. But what she had uncovered was far worse than she expected. She had witnessed the systemic inequality, the favoritism for those with money and status, and the subtle but unmistakable disdain for those who didn't meet the image of class and wealth that the Majestic had come to uphold. Rebecca, for the first time in years, felt like an outsider in her own creation. As she stepped into the elevator, Rebecca clenched her jaw, making a mental note to continue her investigation further. Her disguise, which had allowed her to see things from a different perspective, had given her the clarity she so desperately needed. The problems weren't just surface level. No, they were rooted deep within the very fabric of the Majestic Hotel, and it was time to expose them. The elevator chimed as it reached the top floor, and Rebecca exited into the plush hallway. The plush carpeting underfoot cushioned her steps as she walked towards her suite, but there was no luxury in the experience. Her mind was elsewhere, reflecting on the gravity of what she had seen. She passed the staff, none of whom made eye contact with her. She was just another guest, not one of the powerful few. In the back of her mind, Rebecca could feel the weight of the work ahead of her. Her hotel had once been a beacon of her values, a symbol of everything she had worked for: hard work, dedication, respect for all people. And now it had become a haven for those who valued appearances over authenticity, privilege over equality. This was not what she had imagined, and it certainly wasn't what she had fought for. After a quick change into a professional outfit, one that carried the air of authority, Rebecca called down to room service. She ordered a simple meal, just a salad and a glass of iced tea. But she wasn't hungry. She needed to think. She needed to strategize. She had worked for years to build the Majestic Hotel into the empire it was, but now it was time to save it from the internal rot that threatened to destroy everything she had built. What good was a luxury hotel if it didn't offer the same respect and dignity to everyone, regardless of their wealth or status? When room service arrived, the young man who delivered her food barely spoke a word. He dropped the tray on the table with a lack of care, muttered something about high-maintenance guests, and quickly disappeared. Rebecca's fingers tightened around the silver fork in her hand, but she didn't let the frustration show. It was clear now. This wasn't just about prejudice. It was about incompetence, about the fact that the people who ran her hotel no longer cared for the details that made it great. Rebecca ate slowly, her mind spinning with plans for the future. The time for silence was over. The culture of entitlement and neglect had to end. But where to start? She could fire the staff members who had shown such blatant disregard for her values, but that would only be a temporary fix. She needed a solution that would go to the heart of the problem. It wasn't just the employees, it was the entire system, the culture that had taken root in the hotel. As the night wore on, Rebecca found herself consumed by the thought of what needed to change. She would start by confronting the people who were supposed to share her vision. And the first step in that plan: Mr. Anderson, the general manager. The following morning, Rebecca's plan was set in motion. She called for a meeting with Mr. Anderson, who had overseen the hotel's operations for years. She had always thought of him as a reliable ally, someone who had shared her dream of making the Majestic a place of elegance, grace, and inclusivity. But as she thought about their previous interactions, she couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. How had he allowed the hotel to become so disconnected from its original purpose? How had he allowed the subtle but insidious culture of bias to seep in? Mr. Anderson greeted her with his usual polished smile when she entered his office, his eyes scanning her attire with a slight nod of approval. He wasn't used to seeing her in a power suit. Rebecca usually dressed down when she visited the hotel. She could tell he hadn't recognized her from the day before, when she had posed as a guest. "Mrs. Taylor," he said smoothly. "What a pleasure to see you. What brings you to the hotel today?" Rebecca sat down across from him, her gaze steady and unblinking. "Mr. Anderson, I've been observing the operations of this hotel for the past 24 hours, and I'm deeply concerned about what I've seen." Mr. Anderson's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Concerned? Mrs. Taylor, the Majestic Hotel operates at the highest standards of excellence. What could possibly concern you?" Rebecca's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward. "I witnessed firsthand the preferential treatment given to certain guests, while others, those who didn't fit the image of high society, were ignored and treated with disdain." Mr. Anderson's brow furrowed, but he was careful not to react too strongly. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean. We always strive to meet the needs of our guests, no matter who they are." Rebecca's voice became firm, unwavering. "Really? Because when I tried to book a room, I was told you were fully booked despite numerous vacancies, and when I tried to get a reservation at the restaurant, I was dismissed without so much as a glance. Meanwhile, guests who were dressed in designer labels were treated like royalty." The room was silent for a moment as Mr. Anderson processed her words. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but Rebecca could see the hint of defensiveness in his posture. He was trying to cover up the cracks in his story, trying to find a way to explain away his failings. Rebecca didn't let him off the hook. "Don't make excuses, Mr. Anderson. I've seen enough to know that there is a systemic issue here. You've allowed this hotel to become a place that only values certain types of guests, those with money, with status, and that's not what I built this hotel for. It's not what I've worked for." Mr. Anderson opened his mouth to speak, but Rebecca silenced him with a raised hand. "I'm not finished," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "I've also reviewed the hotel's financial records, and I've found some discrepancies. I think you know what I'm referring to." Mr. Anderson's face drained of color as the realization set in. Rebecca had him cornered. She had known for a while that something wasn't right in the hotel's finances, and now she had proof. He couldn't deny it. "I'm giving you two options, Mr. Anderson," Rebecca continued, her voice cold as ice. "You can resign immediately, and I'll agree not to press charges, or I can take this further and expose your fraudulent activities." His shoulders sagged, and Rebecca could see the defeat in his eyes. Slowly, he reached for the pen on his desk and signed the resignation letter that Rebecca had already prepared. As he left the office, his head hung low. Rebecca let out a slow breath. The weight of what had just happened was heavy, but it was also a victory. Mr. Anderson had been the first step, the first person she needed to confront. And now the hotel was one step closer to becoming the establishment she had always dreamed of. But Rebecca knew this was only the beginning. She would need to overhaul the staff, re-educate them, and restore the values that had once made the Majestic Hotel a beacon of hospitality. There was still so much work to be done, but Rebecca Taylor was determined to see it through. The battle within. Rebecca Taylor stood before the massive windows of her office, looking out over the New York City skyline. The morning sun cast long shadows across the busy streets below, and the bustling sound of the city felt like the heartbeat of the world. The world that Rebecca had built, brick by brick, over the years, an empire of luxury hotels that represented not just success, but the culmination of her hard work, dreams, and values. The Majestic Hotel had once stood as a beacon of inclusivity, a place where every guest was treated with equal respect, regardless of their wealth or appearance. But now, after the disturbing events of the past few days, she wasn't so sure. She had seen firsthand the divide between the guests who were welcomed with open arms and those who were made to feel insignificant, invisible, or unwelcome. It wasn't just about classism or elitism. It was about something deeper, more insidious. It was about the subtle prejudice that had taken root in the very foundation of the hotel, a prejudice that had seeped into the hearts of the staff, the way they looked at people, the way they treated them based on their clothes, their looks, their perceived worth. Rebecca's fingers tightened on the edge of her desk, her mind racing. She had just dismissed Mr. Anderson, the general manager who had allowed this toxicity to fester for years. But one man's departure wouldn't change the culture of an entire hotel. The task ahead of her was monumental. She couldn't afford to think in small steps anymore. The change she needed to see had to be radical. It had to be all-encompassing. But how could she achieve this? How could she restore the majestic hotel to its original, noble purpose when the rot had gone so deep? She knew that the answer lay in confronting not just the staff but herself. Over the years, she had grown disconnected from the very values that had driven her to create this empire. She had become so focused on growth, on profits, on pleasing the powerful clients who filled the hotel's coffers, that she had neglected the very foundation of what had made the Majestic great in the first place. She had turned a blind eye to the small acts of exclusion, the microaggressions, the favoritism that had been allowed to flourish unchecked. And now, the consequences of that neglect were staring her in the face. Rebecca exhaled sharply, her mind now made up. It was time to bring the change she had been avoiding. But it wouldn't be easy. It would require tearing down the toxic systems, confronting employees who had grown comfortable in their prejudices, and most importantly, leading by example. She needed to restore the heart and soul of the Majestic, a hotel that treated all guests with the dignity and respect they deserved, no matter their appearance or social standing. She needed to remind her staff of the core values that had once made this place a symbol of hope, inclusivity, and genuine hospitality. That morning, Rebecca made a decision. She would call an all-staff meeting, the first of many. She would stand before them, no longer as a distant figure, but as a leader who cared deeply about the hotel's future and the people who worked within its walls. She would let them know that things were about to change, and that change would start with them. The grand ballroom, typically reserved for lavish events and extravagant gatherings, was filled with the nervous energy of the hotel's staff. The usual hum of chatter had been replaced by hushed whispers and apprehensive glances as the employees filed in, each one wondering why they were summoned here, so suddenly, by Rebecca Taylor herself. The room had the feel of a courtroom. The employees were seated in neat rows, eyes trained on the front of the room where Rebecca stood, poised and unflinching. Her tailored suit, once a symbol of her position, now felt more like armor. She was about to go to war, not against her staff, but for them, for the hotel, and for the values she had almost forgotten. Rebecca stepped onto the stage, her presence commanding attention. The murmurs died down instantly. The room was silent, and the weight of her gaze seemed to penetrate every corner of the vast space. She could sense the unease in the room, the uncertainty, the fear of what was to come. She had always been a leader who led by example, but now she had to lead with conviction. The hotel she had built was at a crossroads, and the future of the Majestic rested on what happened in this very room. "Good morning," Rebecca's voice rang out, calm but firm, as she scanned the sea of faces before her. "I'm sure you're all wondering why you're here today. You've probably heard by now that Mr. Anderson is no longer with the hotel. His departure is not just a change in leadership. It's the first step in a much larger transformation." Rebecca paused, letting her words settle over the crowd. She could see the questions in their eyes, the confusion, the suspicion. They had worked under Anderson for years, and now, suddenly, he was gone. Rebecca continued. "Let me be clear," she said, her voice unwavering. "The reason Mr. Anderson is no longer with us is because he failed to uphold the values that this hotel was founded upon. The Majestic was built to serve all people, to provide a place of luxury and hospitality for anyone, regardless of their background, their wealth, or how they look. Somewhere along the way, that mission was lost, and it's time to get it back." The room was still. Rebecca could almost feel the collective breath being held by the staff. They had heard rumors about the hotel's internal problems, about the increasing pressure to cater to the rich and powerful, but no one had dared to confront it. Rebecca had always been a distant figure to most of them, a symbol of authority, wealth, and success. But now, in this moment, she was showing them something different. vulnerability, honesty, and most of all, determination. I have seen the way some of our guests have been treated, she continued, her gaze sharpening. I have witnessed firsthand how those who don't fit a certain image, those who aren't dressed in designer clothes, or don't have the kind of wealth that commands respect, are made to feel unwelcome. I've seen it in the way staff members roll their eyes, sigh with impatience, or dismiss people based on how they look. This kind of behavior will no longer be tolerated. Not in my hotel. There was a shift in the room, a subtle change. Some employees shifted uncomfortably. Others looked down at their shoes, but there was an undeniable sense of awareness settling in. Rebecca wasn't just talking about the hotel's reputation. She was talking about their behavior, their attitudes, and their responsibility. Starting today, Rebecca said, her voice rising in authority, things are going to change. We will no longer prioritize guests based on their appearance, their financial status, or the car they arrived in. Every single guest, regardless of who they are, will receive the same level of respect, the same level of care, and the same level of hospitality. No exceptions. She took a deep breath, her next words carrying the weight of a promise. I'm implementing a new set of values at the Majestic, a set of values that will guide us moving forward. Respect, dignity, equality, and service. From now on, everyone will be trained in sensitivity, inclusivity, and respect. Our guests will feel the difference. And if you can't embrace these values, if you can't treat all people with the same level of respect, then you don't belong here. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Rebecca knew that not everyone in the room would be thrilled with this new direction. She could already sense the resistance among certain members of the staff, those who had grown comfortable with the old ways, with the preferential treatment for wealthy guests, with the belief that some people deserve more than others. But Rebecca wasn't here to make people comfortable. She was here to make them accountable. To help us achieve this, Rebecca continued, we will be rolling out new training programs, mandatory for all employees. You'll learn how to engage with all types of guests with respect and how to ensure that everyone receives the highest standard of service. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for effort, for sincerity, for a shift in mindset. The room was silent again, but this time it felt different. The tension had shifted from defensiveness to anticipation. Some of the staff members were nodding, others were whispering to each other, but the room was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with possibility. Rebecca stood tall, feeling the weight of her responsibility. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she was ready. She had to be. The Majestic Hotel had been her life's work, and now it was time to save it from itself. I'm not just asking you to change your actions, Rebecca said, her voice softening. I'm asking you to change your hearts. This is about more than just how we treat our guests. It's about how we treat each other. I want this hotel to be a place where people don't just work, they feel valued. Where the staff isn't just a group of employees but a community. Where we all share a common purpose, a common vision. As Rebecca's words settled in, she could see the shift in the room. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but the foundation was being laid. One step at a time, she would rebuild the Majestic. One guest, one employee, one conversation at a time. The battle was just beginning, but Rebecca Taylor was ready for it. The reckoning. The days following Rebecca's bold speech to her staff were a whirlwind of activity. She had set the wheels of change in motion, but she knew better than anyone that change, real, meaningful change, was never immediate. It required consistency, patience, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths day after day. Rebecca had always been a woman of action, someone who didn't just talk about making things better, she made them better. But as she walked through the grand lobby of the Majestic Hotel the morning after her announcement, she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in her gut. The atmosphere had changed, but there was still a lingering air of resistance among some of the staff. Rebecca's speech had shaken the foundation of what many of them had grown used to: preferential treatment for the wealthy, the assumption that some guests were worth more than others. She knew that many of them resented the new direction, resented the scrutiny on their behavior, and resented the fact that they had to confront their own biases. As Rebecca passed the concierge desk, she noticed that the young man she had encountered the day before, Jacob, the one who had been dismissive and rude, was at his post. He glanced up as she approached, and she could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. He knew what was coming. Rebecca had made it clear in the staff meeting that no one was exempt from the changes. No one was immune to being held accountable. "Jacob," Rebecca said, her voice steady but firm. "A word, please." He hesitated for just a moment, before stepping away from the desk. "Yes, Mrs. Taylor." Rebecca's eyes were sharp as she studied him. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting with a pen, but she could tell that beneath the surface there was something else. A defiance, a reluctance to embrace the new values she had set forth. It was clear he didn't understand why things needed to change. He didn't yet see the depth of the problem. "I spoke with a guest yesterday," Rebecca said, her voice calm but edged with authority. "A guest who tried to make a reservation at the restaurant, but was told we were fully booked despite the availability of tables. And I also observed how you dismissed her without even checking the reservation system." Jacob's face reddened, but he tried to play it off with a weak smile. I didn't think it was a big deal, Mrs. Taylor. The guest didn't look like someone who would be spending a lot of money here." Rebecca's eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer. "That's exactly the problem, Jacob. You don't get to decide who belongs here based on their appearance or their financial status. Every guest who walks through these doors deserves the same level of respect, no matter who they are. I don't care how much money they have or what kind of car they drive. You have to start treating all guests with dignity, or you won't have a place at this hotel. Understand?" Jacob opened his mouth to respond but then closed it, unable to find the right words. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing the gravity of the situation. Rebecca wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just a polite reprimand. This was a wake-up call. If he wanted to stay at the Majestic, he had to change. He had to adopt the values that Rebecca had set forth, not just in his words, but in his actions. "I'll do better, Mrs. Taylor," he mumbled, his voice almost apologetic. "I didn't realize." Rebecca held up a hand, silencing him. "I don't need promises, Jacob. I need results. Start treating every guest with the same level of respect. If I see any more behavior like this, you'll be the one looking for a new job." Jacob's face grew even more pale, and he nodded quickly. "Yes, Mrs. Taylor." "Understood." Rebecca gave him one last glance, making sure he understood the seriousness of her words before she turned and walked away. It wasn't just about reprimanding Jacob, though that was part of it. It was about setting a precedent. The new culture she was cultivating in the Majestic Hotel wouldn't tolerate any form of disrespect or discrimination, no matter how small. If even one employee didn't buy into it, the entire system would be at risk. As she made her way to the elevator, Rebecca couldn't help but feel a surge of determination. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. And she wasn't going to let it go until the Majestic was truly the kind of place she had always dreamed of. A place where respect and dignity were given to everyone, no matter their background, appearance, or financial standing. The weeks that followed were a constant push and pull. Rebecca implemented mandatory sensitivity and inclusivity training, which was met with mixed reactions. Some employees embraced the new values eagerly, excited by the prospect of a more open, welcoming environment. Others, like Jacob, resisted, grumbling under their breath or trying to skirt around the changes. Rebecca could feel the tension in the air as she walked through the hotel, but she remained steadfast. She knew the transformation would take time. It would take patience, persistence, and a willingness to confront the deep-seated biases that had been allowed to thrive for so long. One morning, as she made her rounds, she observed a conversation between two housekeepers, Maria and Linda, in the staff lounge. Their voices were low, but Rebecca's sharp ears caught the tail end of their conversation. "Did you hear about the new training?" Maria asked, her tone one of quiet concern. "I mean, it sounds good and all, but do you really think it will make a difference? People are set in their ways." Linda hesitated before answering. "I don't know. I've worked here for years, and I've seen things I don't like. But maybe it's time we all change. Maybe this is the push we need." Rebecca stood just outside the lounge, listening intently. Maria's skepticism was understandable. Change was never easy. But Linda's quiet support for the new direction gave Rebecca hope. There were employees who saw the value in what she was doing. They weren't just following orders. They were embracing the vision of a better, more inclusive hotel. It was these employees who would help turn the tide. "Excuse me, Maria," Rebecca called softly as she stepped into the room. Maria and Linda both turned in surprise. Maria quickly stood up, a look of guilt crossing her face. "Mrs. Taylor, I didn't mean to." Rebecca raised her hand, stopping her. "It's all right, Maria. I know this is a big shift for all of you, and I understand that it's not easy. But I want you to know that I'm here for you. I'm here to help you understand why this change is necessary, why it's good for the hotel and for you." Maria shifted uneasily, and Rebecca could tell that the words weren't sinking in the way she had hoped. She had always been a woman who valued directness and transparency, but sometimes it was more about showing than telling. "We can do this." Linda spoke up, her voice steady and full of resolve. "We have to. We want this hotel to be the best, right? And that means making sure everyone feels welcome." Rebecca smiled at Linda, feeling a quiet sense of pride. It wasn't much, but it was a step in the right direction. "Exactly. And it starts with each one of you. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for a genuine effort to treat everyone, no matter who they are, with respect." Maria nodded slowly, as if the weight of Rebecca's words was finally starting to settle in. "I'll try," she said quietly. "I will." Rebecca placed a hand on her shoulder, offering reassurance. "That's all I ask. We all have to try, together." As Rebecca left the staff lounge, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The changes she had set in motion were starting to take root. It was slow, painfully slow at times, but it was happening. There would be setbacks, and there would be challenges, but Rebecca was more committed than ever to seeing this transformation through. The Majestic Hotel would not be a place defined by its exclusivity and elitism. It would be a place where everyone, regardless of their background or wealth, could experience true luxury and hospitality. The battle within the walls of the Majestic was far from over, but Rebecca Taylor was prepared for the long fight ahead. She would continue to push, to confront the challenges, to expose the truth, and to rebuild the hotel, not just as a symbol of luxury, but as a living testament to the values she believed in. Every step forward was one closer to the world she had always envisioned, a world where respect and equality were more than just words, but the foundation of everything. And Rebecca was going to make sure it stayed that way. The turning point. The transformation at the Majestic Hotel had been gradual, but there was no mistaking the changes that were taking place. It wasn't just the staff that was shifting. The entire atmosphere of the hotel had begun to change. The once palpable tension had started to dissolve, replaced by a quiet optimism that buzzed through the halls. There was still a long road ahead, but Rebecca could feel the momentum building. What had once seemed like an insurmountable challenge, overhauling the culture of an institution built on years of elitism and exclusion, was beginning to feel more like a mission she could accomplish. Every morning, Rebecca woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. She would walk through the hotel's grand lobby, her eyes sharp as she observed the interactions between staff and guests. She was no longer just a figurehead, a distant symbol of success. She had become an active participant in the hotel's daily operations, working alongside her employees, ensuring that the new values of inclusivity, respect, and dignity were being upheld. The changes had not gone unnoticed. There were still murmurs among some of the more resistant employees, those who struggled to embrace the new values. But for the most part, Rebecca was starting to see real results. Guests were being treated with more care, more attention, and more respect, regardless of their financial status. The overt acts of prejudice that had once plagued the Majestic were becoming less frequent, replaced by genuine hospitality. Rebecca knew that this wasn't just about changing the behavior of a few staff members. It was about creating a new culture. A culture where the staff truly believed in the core values of the hotel. A culture where guests felt welcome, valued, and respected no matter their background. The first real test of the changes came in the form of a high-profile guest, a celebrity known for her charitable work, who had long been a supporter of the Majestic. She was a regular, someone who had stayed at the hotel multiple times, and Rebecca knew her visit would be a key moment in the hotel's journey. When the celebrity arrived at the front desk, Rebecca was observing from a distance. She watched as the staff greeted her with warm smiles and open arms, making her feel like she truly belonged. There were no whispers of her wealth or status, no special treatment based on her fame. She was treated with the same respect as anyone else walking through those doors. Rebecca felt a sense of relief wash over her. This was the result she had been hoping for. The staff had embraced the changes, not just because they were required to, but because they understood the importance of the hotel's mission. And as the celebrity checked in, Rebecca saw the true power of what had been accomplished. The Majestic had become a place of genuine hospitality, not just for the rich and famous, but for everyone. But just as things were starting to look up, a new challenge emerged. The competition was intensifying. Another luxury hotel chain, known for its aggressive marketing tactics and low-cost strategies, had launched a direct attack on the Majestic. They offered deep discounts, all-inclusive packages, and lured away some of the guests who had once called the Majestic their home. Rebecca had expected this. It was inevitable. The luxury hotel market was fiercely competitive, and there would always be those who tried to undercut her. Rebecca was sitting in her office one afternoon, reviewing the latest financial reports when her phone rang. It was George, the head of marketing for the hotel, and his voice was laced with urgency. "Rebecca, you need to see this," George said. "The rival hotel chain has launched a new promotion. They're offering 30% off all bookings for the next 2 months, and they've already started stealing some of our regular clients." Rebecca's fingers tightened around the phone, but she kept her voice steady. "What's our response? We can't just sit back and let them take over." "I'm working on a counter-campaign," George replied. "But we need something big, something bold. A new initiative that will make the Majestic stand out again. They're trying to turn this into a price war, and we can't compete on price alone." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had never been one to engage in a battle based on price. She knew that what made the Majestic truly special wasn't just the luxury. It was the experience, the personal touch, the level of service that no discount could replicate. She needed to remind the world why the Majestic was different. A spark of inspiration hit her. The key to fighting back wasn't to lower prices or offer flashy promotions. It was to double down on what she had started, creating authentic, personalized experiences for the guests. "George," Rebecca said, her voice firm, "I want to launch a new initiative, a loyalty program that will go beyond just perks and discounts. I want our guests to feel like they're part of something special. Let's create bespoke experiences that can't be found anywhere else. Exclusive access to private events, personalized concierge services, and unique collaborations with local businesses. We won't compete with them on price. We'll compete on experience." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Rebecca could practically hear George's mind racing, processing the idea. "I love it," George said finally. "It's bold, it's different, and it's exactly what we need." Rebecca smiled. She had known that the answer lay not in fighting the competition on their terms, but in reaffirming what the Majestic stood for. It was the personal touch, the authenticity of the experience, the attention to detail that set it apart. And now, with the loyalty program, they would remind their guests of that, making them feel like part of the Majestic family rather than just another customer. The loyalty program launched a few weeks later, and its success was immediate. Guests who had once stayed at the Majestic because of its reputation were now returning because they felt a deeper connection to the hotel. The bespoke experiences, tailored to each guest's preferences, from private shopping tours to exclusive art gallery showings, created a level of loyalty that no discount could match. It wasn't just about offering perks. It was about creating memories, about fostering a relationship with the guests that went beyond the transaction. And as the Majestic began to rise above the price wars, Rebecca's confidence grew. She had known from the beginning that the heart of the Majestic was not in its price tag, but in its commitment to making people feel seen, valued, and respected. But the battle wasn't over. The rival hotel chain, though initially caught off guard by the loyalty program's success, wasn't going to back down so easily. They had deep pockets and ruthless business tactics. But Rebecca was no longer worried. She had found the Majestic's true strength, and she knew that the hotel could weather any storm as long as it stayed true to its core values. Rebecca continued to make rounds through the hotel, talking to staff, observing interactions, and ensuring that the new culture of respect and inclusivity wasn't just being upheld but celebrated. One afternoon, as she walked through the lobby, she overheard a conversation between two housekeepers. "I heard the new loyalty program is doing great," one of them said. "Guests are signing up left and right. I think it's because they feel like they matter here, you know." The other housekeeper nodded. "Yeah, I think we're finally starting to get it. The guests, the staff, we all deserve respect. It's not just about the rooms or the amenities. It's about the way we treat each other." Rebecca smiled to herself, the words filling her with pride. The culture had shifted. The Majestic Hotel was no longer just a luxury establishment. It was a place where people felt they belonged, where they felt valued. It was the hotel Rebecca had always dreamed of, a place of true hospitality, where respect and equality weren't just ideals, but realities. As Rebecca looked around at the bustling lobby, filled with guests from all walks of life, she knew that the journey wasn't over. The Majestic was stronger than ever, but she would continue to fight for its future, for the future of every person who walked through its doors. This was her legacy, and she would protect it with everything she had. The Majestic was more than just a hotel. It was a testament to the power of respect, the strength of inclusivity, and the unwavering belief that every guest, no matter who they were, deserved to be treated with dignity. And Rebecca Taylor, the woman who had built it from the ground up, would see that vision carried out for generations to come. The legacy forge. Rebecca Taylor's journey with the Majestic Hotel had transformed her in ways she could never have imagined. What had begun as a business venture, a passion project turned empire, had now become a mission, a calling that went far beyond profits or prestige. The Majestic was no longer just a luxury hotel. It had become a symbol of inclusivity, respect, and human dignity, a place where every guest felt valued, no matter their background or appearance. It was everything Rebecca had envisioned when she first started out. But now, as she stood at the pinnacle of that success, she realized that her work was far from finished. Though the transformation of the Majestic Hotel was well underway, Rebecca knew that true and lasting change wasn't about a few reforms or initiatives. It was about shifting the mindset of an entire institution, one that had taken years to build and decades of entrenched habits to change. Even though the staff had embraced the new values of equality, respect, and personal service, there were still challenges ahead, unseen obstacles that could threaten the very culture she had fought so hard to cultivate. The resistance from some of the staff had waned, but Rebecca understood that old habits die hard. She continued to lead by example, ensuring that every decision, no matter how small, reflected the ethos of the Majestic. She didn't expect perfection, but she demanded sincerity and consistency. She wasn't just an owner anymore. She was a steward, someone who cared deeply about the hotel's legacy and the people who worked there. It was an early morning when the first real test of Rebecca's resolve came. A large corporate group had booked the entire penthouse floor for a week-long retreat. They were high-profile, influential, and known for their extravagant demands. While Rebecca usually prided herself on offering personalized service to all guests, she knew that this group could present challenges. Corporate clients like them had a way of expecting preferential treatment, often forgetting the very ethos of hospitality that Rebecca had worked so hard to instill at the Majestic. The question was, would the staff maintain their commitment to the new values under pressure? Rebecca arrived at the hotel early that morning. Dressed in a simple but elegant dress, her face devoid of makeup, but her presence radiating strength and authority. She wanted to see how things were being handled firsthand. She moved quietly through the lobby, blending into the background, observing how her staff interacted with the corporate group as they arrived. Their designer suits, expensive accessories, and aloof airs were immediately noticeable, but Rebecca's gaze wasn't on their wealth. It was on her team. As the group entered the lobby, the usual bustle of staff members kicked into high gear. Guests were greeted by name, luggage was whisked away, and concierge staff stood ready to assist. But there was one thing that caught Rebecca's attention immediately: the warmth. The staff weren't just performing their duties, they were engaging with the guests, smiling genuinely, listening to their needs, and offering assistance without that subtle hint of condescension she had once witnessed in the hotel's early days. The group leader, a well-known corporate CEO, approached the front desk with an air of authority, as if the world should bow before him. He dropped his briefcase onto the counter with a loud thud. His gaze swept over the receptionist, who was a young woman named Sophia, one of the newer hires. She was fresh-faced, with bright eyes, and a willingness to learn that had quickly made her a favorite among Rebecca's staff. Sophia looked up, her expression warm but professional. "Good morning, Mr. Harris," Sophia said with a calm assurance that immediately put Rebecca at ease. "Welcome to the Majestic. We're thrilled to have you and your team with us." Mr. Harris paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. It was clear he expected a more effusive greeting, a certain level of fawning. Sophia didn't flinch. "If you'll follow me, I'll escort you to your suite," she continued. "We've prepared everything for your arrival, just as requested." Rebecca observed from a distance as Sophia led the CEO and his team toward the elevator. She had been nervous that the staff would fall into the old habits, that they might be swayed by the wealth and status of these guests. But Sophia's calm, assured demeanor showed that the change had truly taken root. The staff were no longer concerned with the financial status of the guests. They were focused on giving them the same level of service that everyone deserved. Rebecca allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction before turning and heading to the back office, where she would spend the day reviewing reports and meeting with her team. She still had work to do, but it was moments like this that reaffirmed her belief in the transformation she was spearheading. She knew there would always be challenges, but as long as her staff continued to embody the values she had instilled, the Majestic would remain a beacon of hospitality in a world that often valued money and status over kindness and respect. The next few months passed in a blur of constant refinement and growth. Rebecca was continually working with her management team to ensure that the new values were not only upheld but celebrated. She instituted a regular feedback loop, where both guests and employees could anonymously share their thoughts on their experiences at the hotel. She held weekly roundtable discussions with her leadership team, where they reviewed everything from guest satisfaction to employee morale. It was a grueling process, but it was essential to ensuring that the hotel remained on track. One afternoon, Rebecca received a letter in the mail. It was an invitation from the prestigious Global Hospitality Association to be honored as the recipient of their Visionary Leadership Award. She had been nominated by several industry leaders, recognizing her efforts in transforming the Majestic into a truly inclusive and welcoming establishment. Rebecca felt a mixture of pride and humility wash over her as she read through the letter. This award wasn't just a reflection of her hard work. It was a recognition of the cultural shift she had created. The industry was taking notice. The award ceremony was held in a grand ballroom in a luxurious venue on the outskirts of the city. Rebecca, dressed in a simple yet elegant black gown, stood before a crowd of industry giants, hoteliers, and influencers. She had been invited to give a speech, but as she stood backstage waiting for her turn, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The woman who had once been driven solely by ambition, focused only on building her empire, was now standing on the precipice of something greater, a legacy. When her name was called, Rebecca stepped onto the stage to a round of applause. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice steady and confident. "I stand here today, not just as the owner of the Majestic Hotel, but as a witness to something far greater than myself. I am here because of the people who have dedicated themselves to the vision we've built, a vision of inclusivity, respect, and the belief that every guest, regardless of their background or wealth, deserves to be treated with dignity." She paused, looking out at the audience, her heart swelling with pride. This transformation wasn't just about changing the way we interact with our guests. It was about changing the way we think about hospitality. It was about reimagining what luxury really means. It's not about the price tag or the status. It's about the experience, the connection, and the respect we show to others. I am deeply honored to be here today. But this recognition is not just mine. It belongs to the incredible team at the Majestic, who every day embody these values, who work tirelessly to ensure that everyone who walks through our doors feels like they belong. The applause was deafening as Rebecca finished her speech, and she couldn't help but feel that she had truly achieved something extraordinary. This wasn't just a business award, it was a validation of the principles she had fought for, the principles that had guided her every decision. And it wasn't just about the Majestic. It was about the entire industry beginning to shift, to recognize that hospitality could be both luxurious and inclusive, that greatness could come from equality. When Rebecca returned to the hotel, the celebration didn't end. She had been recognized, but for her, the real work was just beginning. There was still so much to be done, still so many lives to impact, so many attitudes to shift. The Majestic Hotel wasn't perfect, and Rebecca knew that maintaining the values they had fought so hard to instill would require constant vigilance. But she was no longer doing this alone. The staff, the guests, and the community had embraced the vision. And that, she realized, was the true measure of success. As she stood in the lobby, watching guests check in, each of them greeted with the same warmth and respect, Rebecca knew that her legacy was secure. The Majestic Hotel had become a place where people from all walks of life could feel at home. It was no longer just a luxury brand. It was a movement. And Rebecca Taylor, the woman who had built it, had created something far greater than any award or recognition could ever represent. She had created a place where the value of every person, whether a guest or an employee, was acknowledged and celebrated. The Majestic Hotel had become a symbol of something bigger than luxury. It was a testament to the power of respect, kindness, and the belief that every human being deserved to be treated with dignity. And as long as Rebecca had any say in the matter, that would always be the hotel's greatest legacy.